Today on the Mindful Negotiating Podcast, we have Attia Qureshi, the author of a book I just finished, Never Settle, Persuasion and Negotiation Skills to Get What You Want. Attia, thanks for being here again, a second time, actually.
Thanks for having me.
So to begin with, can you tell us the story of your name as well as rate how good my was in saying it?
Oh, the story of my name goes back to when I first went to school and had to argue with my Montessori teacher about the pronunciation. And from there, it has progressed and has evolutions every time I enter into a new
Mm,
situation. So, school was a big one, the workplace was a big one, graduate school, going into consulting and starting my own practice,
mhm.
distinguishing between friends and families and my romantic life. I think you probably got a 6 out of 10. You were pretty good, but areas for improvement. And also, to be fair, it's really hard because if you don't grow up with that specific way of using your tongue, then it's really hard to do later on.
Yeah. It is
Yeah.
crazy how, and this may be like a throwaway thought, but like the muscular like muscle memory of speaking other languages is like truly like that NG in the back of my like that's is not something I have to practice.
Exactly. And it's really hard to get if you don't grow up with it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and what about your last name?
Qureshi, that's a lot easier for people. When people ask me, they're like, "Oh, I would have gotten that right." That's what I was thinking. So that one is actually easier. And but in I think the first name trips people up enough that they're like, "Okay, I'm just gonna check on the whole thing."
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
think that when people say that they would have gotten that part, that they actually would have?
Yeah, I think that when people try it, they generally get it right, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have some sort of tricky, a double T in it,
Yeah.
and it is pretty phonetic. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Phonetic is good.
Yeah.
You talk a bit about the importance of names in the book
Yeah.
as well as homophily. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna set you on your verbal journey and take us through some of that if you could.
Oh, yeah. We I think that when we first started writing, and this just came and flowed out of me. Sometimes in the process, there were moments where and there aren't that many moments of it where it felt like pure gold, where all of a sudden this thought came and you just started writing about it. And Doug Stone actually was the one who, after I wrote the story, I was like, oh, this is not a typical negotiation story. And he was like, no, this is really good. You should add more of this. And that gave Don and I a lot of permission to explore those types of topics and stories in the book. And for me, as I started thinking about names, there's something so personal with a name. And we names are culturally significant in every society.
Mm,
And as we were going through the idea of reciprocity and relationship building, names seem to follow really naturally in my mind because I've had such tension in my life around my name and
mm,
how people are accessing my name and what it means to different parts of me.
mm,
Whether it's my family part where people say it perfectly, whether it's the friend part where I practice with people because I care about it and want to give them a chance, or if it's more professional and I'm like, you know what? Like, it's not worth it right now. And in that process of thinking through that, I realized, man, when people make an effort and try, even if they don't get it right, it means a lot.
yeah.
It really means a lot to me, especially when my now husband, who when we were first starting to date, made a massive effort, so much so that he recorded me saying my name so he could practice in his truck. And I started realizing that it is a form of relationship building because of how personal it is, and that when you make that mental effort to get it right, but also to remember it, it is like giving someone a sandwich because it triggers not only this deep awareness within them, but it also shows that you're making a small effort toward them.
One of the things I really love about this book is that it's like both a synthesis of some things, like you have some Rifa, some Schelling. Like it has a good MIT influence, is what I want to say. It's like there's some
Yeah.
neuroscience, behavioral economics, Kahneman Tversky, like things that many of us know are part of the field. But I also heard you say that you like had some play also in kind of how the book is laid out, which I think it
Yeah.
deserves at least a little bit of attention to in terms of having a co-author, practical exercises. Take it, take it from there.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, here's what we did wrong. We wrote the entire book before we wrote a proposal or showed it
Mhm.
to anyone outside of a couple of key people. And you're not supposed to do that. You're only supposed to write a proposal and a couple of chapters and then shop it around.
Yeah,
And we spent several years writing the whole thing, which also gave us a lot of, I mean, there was the con of you put a lot of effort into something that you don't know is going to be successful, but the pro was we had a lot of time to play with it. And
yeah,
there was nothing, I don't think anything is the same as where we started. We split up chapters, we put them back together, we reorganized chapters and batted it around. And I think that I could not imagine writing a book by myself because of how much mental effort it takes, how much willpower it takes. So when you have a partner to help you and the collaboration of batting it around back and forth
yeah,
and pressure testing it.
yeah.
And sometimes, of course, that's infuriating because you have an idea of how it should be. You
Right.
have a partner who has a different idea.
Yeah.
But John and I have also worked together for a decade now. And so we were able to figure out ways of working through those pieces. And it was by far such a value add to have a partner going through this process
Yeah.
because of how much it helped with exercises, with ordering, with stories.
I was going to ask you what advice you would give to would-be first-time authors, and I'm wondering. It sounds to me like, given some of the interests of dread, self-avoidance, self-loathing, blah blah blah, that a co-author is a great option. Would would that be part of your, if you're jumping into the pool, have an instructor with you, like
I, the right co author.
the right co-author?
It has to be someone who complements your
Mm,
style. I am type A, highly organized, very motivated by timelines and deadlines.
mhm.
John is very laid back, has all of the knowledge in the world around negotiation,
Yeah.
and has a really strong sense of the concepts because he worked with Fisher, right? He was
Right.
in it from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so that complemented where I could bring stories and ideas. He brought a ton of the anchoring pieces, and we were both flexible enough. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important. We were both flexible enough, and we decided it would be a 50-50 partnership from the start. So we set it up in a way that made it, we could bring the best part of ourselves to the process. It is a very hard process. So hopefully you pressure tested that relationship
Yeah.
before you would enter writing a book because there are moments that are incredibly challenging and you want to know that you can get
Yeah.
through that. But
Yeah.
yes, first time authors, super helpful to have someone that you're doing it with,
Mm.
and maybe better to write a couple chapters in a proposal than the whole thing.
Thank you for blazing a path that will be easier for those to walk behind you.
Yeah.
Something I really, my favorite part of the book, actually, I think, like, is that it is, to my mind, the first negotiation book that neither says PON has everything in the world, nor screw PON and those like Ivy Leaguers, but says, yeah, let's continue to make it accessible. Let's continue to expand it. And if you're not identifying with either my identity or perspective, great. Here's another point of view in the room. At least to me, it kind of models, I don't know if this was intentional, but like the co-facilitation experience, which I really liked.
Yes, that's exactly right. I think that there's what we wanted to do was honor all of the amazing work that's out there.
Hmm.
And we
Yes.
like to touch upon all of it because it's incredible work. And all we want to do is help find a way to make it more meaningful and impactful that
Yeah.
drives behavioral change.
Yeah.
Because we need to figure out how to practice this in our daily lives and make it muscle memory.
So I have two questions. One is an open-ended and one is the leading question that I actually want to ask. The open-ended question is, what is your favorite study that you use in the book? And because I hope that it's the Ellen Langer one, which is one of my favorites, I'm also wondering if you could, if it's not that one, also walk through that one.
Oh my gosh. That's so hard. It's like asking you to pick your favorite kid.
That's, well, my understanding is you're going to make the right choice as long as you choose each time currently. And I know enough
Yeah,
that like,
yeah, it's probably an in the moment thing, to be honest,
yeah,
because
yeah,
for me, people often ask me, why did you guys choose the title Never Settle?
mm,
And originally, John and I really liked the title Level Up, but that's a program, um, kind of like Obamacare in the UK. And they were like, you can't use that. And we're like, okay. It's like a full, like, whole country program. But it changes for me. Often, like, there's a root to the reason, but depending on what I'm working in at the moment, it will vary a little bit. And I feel like that's similar with with studies on what I love the most in the moment. If I'm in a moment of really appreciating reciprocity, then it's
yeah,
definitely Cialdini.
yeah,
If I am in a moment of, like, we're talking about name, then I'm like, oh, I love this study about how
yeah,
they
yeah.
found the name still triggers the brain even when people are in a persistent vegetative state.
Incredible.
So,
It brings new meaning to the
yes,
necessity of being appreciated, seen, or respected, right? If that's as
yeah,
autonomic as breathing. Whoa.
exactly.
Whoa.
Yeah.
We might have lost a tiny piece just from lag there. So I'm really sorry. I missed just a piece that I didn't want to miss, which is you were talking about the title of the book.
Oh, yes. Let me, I can restart it. So, a lot of times people ask me about how we chose the title of Never Settle. And John and I actually independently originally came up with the title Level Up, as in level up your negotiation skills. But
Sure.
then we found out it's actually a countrywide government program in
Ah,
the UK.
okay, that's what you're saying.
And we're like, no, you can't use that. And we're like, okay, fine, I guess. We don't want the equivalent of Obamacare as our book title. So we pivoted. But and there's a root for me. I think John and I both would have different things that mean that different meaning to both of us on the title. And there's something that's consistent, but it also can vary a little bit based on the work I'm doing in that moment.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell us? Well, I have so many questions here, Tia. Could could you tell us about? Well, I also something else like is just like kind of the level of specificity. I feel like a lot of these things may have some familiarity, but it's built out like kind of like one layer further. And so I am curious about like I think the typical Ellen Langer Xerox study is something to the effect of because is important, and Cialdini picking up on that and saying, "Yep, humans like reasons for what they do." But I'm
Yeah.
wondering, to me, there are mindful and mindless implications, which is also some of the inspiration of what we're up to. And so yeah, I'd love if you could chat through kind of the layers and implications of small, medium, and larger requests, which is a nuance that I think gets lost
Mm.
usually when we repeat it.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
I,
I
I,
mean, it's
I can ask a question that would be more useful.
perfect.
So
Yeah.
my understanding is that there are three condition groups. First, in terms of what they say,
Yeah.
but then there's also the size of the request. And so I'm more familiar with the three condition groups of what you say to test
Yeah.
for. So like first condition is something like it says like graduate school library, New York or something. Um, can I cut you in line? No request. Can I cut you in line
Yeah.
to get copies because I'm going to be late to class or something that's a valid reason? And then third
Yeah.
condition group is something that adds no semantic novelty. So can I cut you in line because I have copies to make, self-evident. And so
Yeah.
you have both like, yeah, people like reasons, but also at least where I'm most interested is the mindlessness, what only are terms like mindless behavior, from the lack of differentiation between the success rate of small requests when the form is
Yeah.
the same, even if the reason doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
so I think that part's cool. And I think you add on to that in a really helpful way, which is very relevant to like this showing up in our practice, which is how many copies do you need to make? Is it a small
Yeah.
request, a medium, or a large? And I'm wondering how that might affect actually how I use the word because, when, and how effective it can
Mm. Yeah, I think that well, it depends on, I think a small and medium request, you could probably get away with quite a bit in terms of your reasoning and rationale.
be. Yeah.
Because it's not, what is the impact on me going to be?
Hmm.
But a large request, the more of a why you can provide, the more likely you are to be able to get that through. And it's, when you're asking to make copies and cut in line for that, most people in their minds, it's like, okay, an extra 30 seconds. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Now, let's say it's a medium request, which could be cutting in line at the airport, and people are already feeling under time pressure,
Yeah.
right? And you say, hey, I gotta, do you mind if I cut in line? And you don't give it. And a lot of times people will say yes,
Yeah.
right? But then almost always you run into someone who gives you this look,
Yep.
this like no look.
Yeah.
And then you tell them, my flight is boarding right now.
Yeah.
And usually they let you go.
Have you
Right.
ever
So
had?
I'd say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. You tell a story in the book. I think her name was Regina, about the
Oh, yeah.
power of name in an airport. I'm also wondering if you've been in
Yes.
that situation where you've had to
Yes.
cut in line and what you did and how it went.
Yeah. I mean, I'm recalling this, literally recalling this from a memory I
Yeah.
have of getting to the airport. It was an international flight. They were boarding. Something had happened to get us, so much traffic to get to the airport in the first place that we hadn't accounted for, and still needing to go through customs. um and air passport control. And so I do remember most people being totally fine with me going forward, except this one guy giving me this look when I asked, and I was like, listen, I'm so sorry to do this, my flight is boarding. And then he was chill and fine about it. So that needed more of a explanation.
Yeah.
Now, with a large request, let's think through, like, what would a large request be? Because I'm thinking about the book and I'm thinking about my easement request,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Jared.
With my neighbor,
Yeah.
Jared. Jared, people ask me, they're like, has Jared read the book? And I'm
I
like,
was gonna ask that
no,
too.
no. I texted him
Oh, nice.
6 months ago asking if he wanted to read it, give me any feedback. And
Yeah,
his
that's
response was, no, thanks. It sounds like you stay really busy. Wishing you the best of luck. And I was like, okay,
all right.
cool.
Good
That's
fences
fine.
make good neighbors. Yeah.
Yes. Um, so it was fine. I don't think he'll read it. And you know what? That might just be better for our relationship long term anyway. But the easement request, right? That request, in my mind, required a lot more building and explanation. And that is a large request. And I think with any large request like that, I'm trying to think if there would be a large request that would be with several people. Let's think in the political system or any sort of system where you're asking for donations or
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
You usually need to give a lot of reasoning and rationale to people.
Yeah. So you also bring in Adam Grant stuff, mostly
Hmm.
on, I think, the
Givers, takers, and
givers and
matchers.
matchers. I think that's fascinating. I'm curious to, like, one path we could take is like the game theory of society and like how we
Yeah.
could play and how we can affect the system. That's one place I'd love to go if you'd like. The
Yeah.
other is when I think about Adam Grant, I think of, is it Think Again? I think it's like chapter 7, the inoculation whisperers or something like that, the vaccine whisperers. And so you
Yeah.
mentioned like providing reasons or marshaling evidence, which to me is always like a very kind of like Harvard Law School type of approach of marshaling the evidence.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talk a lot about the use of like, I think, questions as well. But yeah, but
Hmm.
I'm wondering about both those paths of like kind of the
Yeah.
Adam Grant fork of matchers, takers, and givers, as well as
Yeah.
like, is persuasion more about a push versus pull? What do you
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's start there because
think?
persuasion is absolutely more about a pull.
Hmm.
Yes. And John and I talk about, if we were to do a follow up, what would that be? And I think it would be around that. How
Hmm.
there are these. basic frameworks, which are still really powerful around persuasion, but that it ultimately, we talk about how their interests are the silver bullet. And
Mhm.
so that's the pull. When
Yeah.
you pull their interests, you ask the right questions, you listen deeply and get information from them. That makes it so that they are so much more open and receptive.
Yeah.
And that goes with your bigger asks, like we were just talking about. And it also goes with this idea of what you're talking about now, where are we trying to push them towards something, or can we open them up to a
So let me ask what I think is a harder hitting question, if you're okay with it, which is like John includes an amazing story that I think is something like he was making an offer to Sheila or something, but intentionally didn't care about that thing because what he really cared about was the second offer, and writes this in like a very humorous way. Yes, the next kid. I got the next kid. So first of all, those stories as well as yours and Isaiah's, I was like, just marry the guy already. There are a lot of times where I was like audibly talking in the book. But that was one of them when I was like, I love the gamesmanship. I'm not type A. I do. I'm not above having an ego or wanting a win or being like, see what I did to like whatever. And I worry that some of these tactical things, like um, add to some gamesmanship that might be inefficient. And at the very same time, I want to admit, like, I'm so glad. Ooh, shit. uh, I was on the precipice of brilliance. Hello.
and said everything was fine. So, okay,
It
I
sounds like it might be on
it
my
froze
end.
for me, so I decided I'd
Uh,
rejoin. But the last thing I heard was this idea of gamesmanship.
yeah, I
We
was on the
start from there.
precipice
We'll
of
get it.
brilliance. No, I'm just kidding. So on the one hand, like I love the stories that like right John has about like yeah, my first offer isn't really my first offer. But then immediately where my head goes is kind of like the inefficiency of positioning, like positional versus like, I just wonder, like, with the negotiation expertise, like, aren't we trying to win to some
Ooh,
extent? Or like, are we squeamish about winning? Is that part of it? And then my other kind of like related thing is I love that you know brought in like the never split the difference material and minimal encouragers and all these tactical things. And I love the story where John is saying like I'm
yeah,
an
yeah,
expert. That would never work on me. And he's like, yeah, never work on me. And it works.
yeah.
So no doubt it's effective, right? And so I'm wondering if like part of you talk about manipulation, influence, persuasion. I worry about these things all day. Um, yeah, I wonder if you can say
Yeah.
more about the winning piece and like
Oh my
how
gosh,
much of what we say we
that's
do
such a
do
good
we do
question. So first of all, I would say
or should
that
we?
I think doing it on people in the field, you get more grace. So I would say John and Sheila probably have a
Yeah,
much
yeah, yeah,
different
yeah.
dynamic because they both might be using it in different ways on each other, like to do the dishes, and John is all of a sudden in the tire shop versus, other examples that they
Right.
had, and same with between Voss and
Yeah.
John. So I think there's potentially a small difference there. I would also say that it might be case by case, right? Like there are truly, when I was taking the program at Harvard, when I was looking at students, there truly are people who are oriented toward wanting to do this all day long. I am a competitive person and I like to win. So I have to
Mhm.
remind myself to use these techniques. And so I think that there
Mm.
is a moment like you're talking about where we might use the ones that we feel squeamish about. And I agree with you. I do think we feel squeamish about saying we want to win because of how much we emphasize value creation. And there is a
Yeah.
tension there because we do want to win and we talk about value creation and
Yeah.
building things for both sides. And I think that's where some of that gets alleviated for me
Yeah.
when we talk about criteria, because then I'm like, oh, I can push hard on criteria and I can be soft on the
Yeah.
relationship. And that makes me feel better about it. And so that's the
Yep.
way I try to frame it is like, am I being soft on the relationship, but I can still be hard with techniques that are more distributional.
Yeah. And I think you do a great job in the book
Yeah.
of talking about like this is a sequencing issue. Like we're not actually asking to choose
Yes,
like
exactly.
candidates
And like,
for
can you start with the
easier said than done.
relationship and can you start with
But
your own self-management before you go into the distribution?
yeah,
Mm.
you talked about a bit
Mhm.
about like a practice of your own practice. And you really, I think, nudge constructively people at the end to be like, great, gamify it, make it yours, do it. Like, what are you doing well already? And I'm wondering if we can talk about that because this book kind of like gestures
Yeah.
away from the page, which is really lovely. And I'm
Oh my
wondering,
gosh.
how do I build my
I
own practice or
I like
gamify
it in two ways. First, it's what do I suck at? Oftentimes, it was for a long time
it?
listening, which we talk about is like we were just saying, one of the silver bullets of the pull. And I had an orientation for a long time before I came across this for a push. For over a decade, I was all about the push until I went to MIT.
Mm,
And so for
yeah.
me, pivoting to the pull and practicing exercises because I don't need as much practice on distribution. I'm already good at that. I need more practice on the pull, their interest, the relationship building. So I like to identify truly like take a moment, sit with it and be like, what am I not good at? And then the second thing is what would be fun for me to do with people in my life? And that would support me in it. So, is there something that I can make in a
Mm,
game with my sister or my husband or other people close to me so that maybe we start practicing on each other and we don't realize it? And that's where the gamification comes in. Along with strangers, I find it very pleasant to figure out with the small
mhm,
relational pieces, whether it's a sandwich or using someone's name or just having an interaction with them and learning about them, what impact that makes. Recently, a few months ago, I was flying to
yeah.
Charleston for work and I was at the Detroit airport and I was starving and I kept ordering food and this bartender was amazing. And he kept, like I think I placed four different orders over the course of half an hour. And I was chatting with him and got to know him. And at the end, my bill came and it was for only the one item that I had originally ordered. And airport food is outrageously expensive. And it was just, I was like, wait, this is wrong. And he's like, no, no, it's okay. And of course, like I took care of it later, but that gesture that he made and the time I spent on the relational side, because I know that's something that I want to build on and that I like to see the impact of. And sometimes it shows up in a small way and sometimes it shows up in a big way. But the later impact for me that I'm coming to realize really
Mm,
recently is the value it actually drives for me later, personally. So, not tangible value, but emotional value that I get out of it and the connection. And I think that John and I don't know if we emphasize it enough in the book, but we see a trend in society of isolation and loneliness. And the idea of some of these exercises helping bridge that and practicing it myself and then seeing that I actually feel better and less lonely when I do have a 5 minute conversation or connection with a stranger is amazing.
yeah. Yeah. So I have a specific question there. I think there's a clarification of like hard on the person's or separate the person from the problem, and kind of saying this doesn't mean like they're two separate issues of both of importance. A saying that was also common for me to hear
Mm,
was to separate the relationship from the substance, and that might have been more in kind of like the corporate training space, where there was really a hope to like cleave what was rational and good versus irrational and evil. Um, and um, yeah, I'm wondering about that and how you and John might think about like I guess the idea is that the relationship then doesn't technically have substance by definition. And like you're alluding to, like these
mhm.
small social micro interactions can do really substantive things. Or phrased differently, we have objective value and subjective value about the experience. And that's where like the social cohesion
Yeah.
comes in. Like, would I want to do this again? And the worse we get at it, the more we don't
Yeah.
want to do it again, the more ChatGPT is like, you
Yeah.
only need me as your friend. Like
Well, this
whatever.
goes back to your question
So
about givers, takers, and matchers
um,
and like the
yeah, I'm
societal game and the experimentation that we're doing.
yeah,
And what originally
yeah,
drew me to this work from day one was the societal impact it could have. And the way that John had framed it at MIT, which had really inspired him from Fisher, was if we all just moved even 1% toward relational and principled in how we interact with each other,
yeah,
what are those ripple effects? And so if I had a really nice connection with
yeah,
that gentleman at the airport, right? And then he felt really good and he had a nice interaction with someone. And he became a giver, and I felt more like a giver. And that translated to other situations. That's pretty incredible. And of course, it's not going to happen all the time, but I think that it giving begets giving with enough progress and enough success in it. And of course, it's not with everybody, but if we do try it with enough people, I think it is a pretty amazing cascade.
yeah. You mentioned that like upwards of
Say no.
75% of your class struggles with assertiveness, and also that maybe there are givers, and most givers aren't going to do so well in life at all, but a few are going to do really well. I'm wondering if you could talk about
Yes.
like what giver, taker, matcher means, and also the
Yes.
what's
So,
how does this help us
givers
as categorization,
are, my
or how could it?
parents are just unmitigated givers. They will give to anyone and everyone who asks for it. Um, Takers are the people who, unfortunately, I've seen many times, as with the child of a giver, who just keep taking. And they're like, cool, like you want to give this to me? I will keep taking and taking. And they don't give anything back. And then matchers are the ones that are see the giver, appreciate what the giver is giving, and they become a giver. But if they run into a taker, then they will match the taker. And what we espouse is that why don't you try being a giver? Try a few times, and most of the time, not all
Mm,
of the time, but a lot of the time, the other person will become a matcher. I think that societally, a lot of us are matchers where we want to match the way people are treating us. And that's where people have really good success. The givers who have the most success are because they continue to give, but only to people who match them. But the givers who continue to give with
mm,
even with the takers, that's where you get in trouble. And that's where we say, no, no, no. You try 3 or 4 times, but then you stop because you don't want to keep giving to someone who just
yeah,
keeps taking. There's no value
yeah.
in that relationship. So you always want to find relationships that drive value for both parties.
So you also talk about, I'm going to
Mm.
butcher these terms here, but I think different kinds of processing and automatic versus. I'm wondering if you can talk more about that, just because I'm thinking about like,
Oh,
I know I shouldn't text them back. I know that nothing will
yeah.
change this time. I know Einstein's definition of insanity. And why am I
Oh,
doing it? So I'm wondering if that relates to that type of processing, or how we
yeah.
get over the performance
Small
gap of knowing
question.
versus doing.
Super small
Small
question.
question.
Yeah. Well, that
I only
takes
ask
me
small
back
questions.
to what I think of as the internal negotiation. The the or like the mindful moment in between our response. And because we have something, right? There's an action, something that kind of explodes and gets things going. Not that it has to be explosive, but there's something that starts. And then there's a moment. And in that moment, I think, is the internal negotiation where we have to sit with it and decide what we do. And I think that most of us,
Mm.
unfortunately, even in this space,
Yeah.
who work in this space and live in this space, are reactive. We are reactive. I think it's human nature. Yeah. I think it's human nature. I mean,
I'm
oh
an
my gosh,
expert,
the
damn it.
times that my sister would yell at me and be like, "Are you kidding me? Like, this is what you do." And I'm like, "I know. I know. I know."
Yeah. Is it is there any element for you, or I'll just say plainly for me, that part of my chosen career here
100%.
is knowing my weaknesses well enough to want to shame myself publicly, to commit to doing
Yeah,
the thing that
100%.
I
I mean,
know
you
I
can see
should do
that
and
in
sometimes
most
dread doing.
fields, especially like behavioral fields. You look at psychology, psychiatry, conflict,
Uh,
negotiation, communication, and then you know people in that field. Maybe they're in your family or close
yeah.
personal your life, and you're like, how are you doing this work? I think it's very similar in that vein where we want to
Okay.
be better and we can actually be very good at it in a professional environment. And we know that we struggle, especially in those reactive moments, which I think is totally human and natural. And so, if we think about that moment, right, if we can take that mindful moment and
Mm,
pause and really, this is where we took an entire chapter and deviated from the seven elements to talk about emotions, especially our own emotions, because studies are coming out showing how much of an impact, somewhere upwards of 90 to 95% emotional emotion driving unconscious decision making. And so that's where we have to sit,
yeah.
and that's where we have to think about, rather than being reactive, what are the emotions coursing through us that make us want to have the reaction we know is not going to be the right one. And then what are the exercises that I need to practice outside of this reactive moment to build the muscle memory and the ease around it? So give me an example of something, because maybe you have something
Yeah.
that where you would be reactive in that way. Yeah.
Well, where I was, it would probably be like a family thing. And my hypothesis I'd be curious about your reaction to would be um, without understanding the patterns that own us. Because I think you make an allusion to subject object development in a really nice way, like
Yeah.
of like your emotions own you or you own them. And so I think for me, its root and its programming is the family. And until you can name and
Yeah.
address, it's probably going to own you in that repetition compulsion of you're still doing it.
Yeah.
To my mind, that's a positive. It's actually not as insane. It's actually like a sad attempt
Mm-hmm.
at a different outcome from your childhood, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to either relitigate for the hope of a corrective experience. And to some extent, like we could offer that to each other in our conflicts when we realize that it's
Yeah.
actually, you're not just talking to me, like you're talking to someone else from the past as well. But that's what I would say. I'm curious what you think about that hypothesis because, yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
family
would
stuff is
agree.
kind
I
of
think
part of
that
like gets into the
the
systems of it.
that whole inner negotiation, that moment that you're taking and you're trying to assess your own reactivity, has a lot to do with the systems work and how much of that you've done and how much of it you can tap into so that you're not responding in that child or whatever part of yourself
Yeah.
that is reactive. And so the
Yeah.
dipping your toe in the water of that, because that can be really hard and intensive work to do, is first trying to just identify the emotions that are driving you, right? The first step is, what is really driving me toward this? And then, like you were saying, taking a hold of that rather than letting it rule you. Because even just that much, even labeling the emotions and saying them out loud can reduce all of the intensity of those feelings, and you can figure out a more productive path forward.
What is
Mm.
the connection between the power of hearing our name, even when vegetative, and
Oh,
the relief we get from naming an emotion? Are they even connected?
I don't. My initial thought is, do we? I mean, humans like it kind of goes back to the idea of the core emotions and role. Do we just like things to be labeled? Do we like clarity and certainty? And
Mm.
when we have our name labeled, it feels anchoring toward us. When we label emotions, we recognize the role of them and it gives it a place. And when we don't do that, it's just a swirling tornado mess inside of us. That's,
I don't know much about ancient names, but I remember having a professor that talked about
yeah.
like being careful, and you mentioned about care for names as well. But he was saying in the
Yeah.
context of if someone knew your name, they had a power over you or something. And
Yeah.
I just wonder about like I think language is very powerful. Like we don't have to go deep into Abrahamic traditions, but we could in terms of like word. Like I mean, I think this
Yeah.
is like specifically Christian idea of like in the beginning was the word, but in terms of like even DNA and the concatenation of these things, I'm just my bigger question is like you're clearly I think
Yeah.
bringing like MIT into the fold in a really helpful way here, and I'm curious where you see the future of I don't know what to call it like whatever that gathering that you and John created was with your work, whatever that community is that feels called in a way or
Yeah.
sees like the potential network effect of principle just being
Yeah.
slightly better at what we're doing and what that could do for like the future. Um, where do you hope that it goes in
Uh,
terms of academically, socially, whatever?
I I think that John and I, our biggest hope was for people to find a way toward change and improvement. And I think it's so hard in today's world. We're
Yeah,
tired, we are worn out, we're overloaded, overwhelmed,
yeah,
burned out in all the ways at home, at work, with the news, with everything. And life and those and when it
yeah.
gets that way,
Life.
and I was reading an article that we feel more burned out than ever, we feel more stressed
Mm.
than ever, even though we have more money and technically more time. um yeah, I know. It's yeah.
AI will save us though. I didn't ask my obligatory AI. Your okay, your nod or your AI
Oh
thing.
yeah.
We
Oh,
also didn't
a
talk about.
textile
I didn't know
company
you had
way
a
back
clothing
when. Yeah,
company.
it's true.
Um,
And so I think that we wanted to showcase that how accessible it could be to make really small steps toward improvement, because it doesn't have to be some big thing. People talk about confidence or
yeah,
negotiation skill as this huge fundamental thing, and
yeah,
it doesn't have to be like that. It can be the tiniest thing, which is just going and saying your barista's name at the coffee shop tomorrow, and that's it. And make
yep,
it
yep,
accessible and easy, and just a one
yep,
thing that takes 30 seconds. And that's what I would hope, is that through that accessibility and through those 30-second moments that can add up over time,
yeah,
it does make the improvement, rather than keeping it academic and rather than keeping it really big and hard to hard to do because it feels like too much. How can we make it accessible to people where they can
yeah,
slowly implement?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And by giving
Yeah.
it names and names for processes and all these things, it breaks it down. There are so many concepts that I'm so
Yeah.
happy are in the book,
Yeah.
like exposure therapy, in terms of like what we're up to. I won't go too far down that road necessarily, unless you really want to talk about it. I think that's such an important thing. The concept I thought was so lovely that I'm just remembering now is
Oh yeah.
it's characteristic to
You
humans,
yeah, yeah,
ants, and
yeah.
maybe a few others. Eusociality, and and I think do you know Jeff Soul by any chance? He talks about like pro-sociality and like
Yeah.
the idea of negotiating with others in mind. And
Yeah.
I'd love if you could talk a little bit more about that
Just a little
concept
behind the
and maybe the
scenes.
network effect that we talked about.
John, the original cut of the ant story was like 5 pages long. And I was like, John, I know you love this story and I know you love ants, but we have to.
But you already got
I'm like, we
Civilization 5
cannot
in
talk
there,
about
so chill
ants for
out.
like 5 pages. So the idea is that,
Yeah.
that we are always trying to figure out who is friend or foe. Animals are always trying to figure it out, even ants who have the tiniest brains with the tiniest processing power. And most do it by scent. So they go and smell and decide if there's friend or foe. If they're friend, it's fine. If foe, it's like this massive warfare that happens. But for humans, we are one of the
Mm.
only creatures that can change our definition of friend or foe. And we can adjust. And someone
Oh.
who was foe, like my neighbor Jared, can become a friend if we make the effort toward them and they are willing to make the effort back, of course, right? So if we can become a giver and they can match, we
Yeah.
can slowly transform that relationship. And so the idea is that I think there are two things there where first, influence is always possible, no matter the relationship. Of course, it's going to be a lot harder in a bad relationship, but it's always possible. And the best first step is some sort of reciprocity, right? It's some sort of olive branch. It could be using
Yeah.
someone's name, it could be remembering something about them, it could be taking them a cold glass of lemonade. But that olive branch and trying it a few
Hmm.
times can pivot those relationships. And oftentimes I have students ask me, they're like, oh my gosh, can we ever
Yeah.
negotiate on these massive scale things that we're seeing in our world? They ask me, like, how would you negotiate
Mm.
with Putin? And I'm like, oh my God, well, that's an outrageous question. And,
I get that. The
and
fact
I'm
that even
like,
it's a humbling question. What do
I'm
you
like,
say to that? What
well,
do you say
first
to
I say
that
that
though?
is way beyond the scope of this conversation. Lemonade. That's it.
Look,
We
bring
just have
him
to take him like a
a glass
cookie.
of.
He has really low blood sugar. um, no, but it's like it's
Yeah, yeah, he'll
you
be
think
fine.
about those things and you think about how when it becomes a taking mentality, or they ask me about Gaza, right? They ask me about these really entrenched
Mm.
issues. And over time, how they build up and they build up and they build up. And like, is there any hope? And I'm like, I think there's always hope, but it takes so much longer and it's so much harder as these issues build up. And that's why I get so worried about things becoming more and more partisan in our country as well. And I've been teaching public policy students, and I see them every year becoming more partisan themselves.
Yeah,
And for me, just trying to convince them to take a step away from that and realize that there's always an opportunity to influence and the other side is not your enemy is a big part of it, because otherwise
yeah,
people don't even see the chance. And I want people to see the chance and know. And the ants is a really good way of
yeah,
framing it from the beginning that we can change and we don't have to see everybody as our enemy forever. Humans have the capacity and the capability to pivot toward friend.
yeah. Um, I also want to just touch on, and of course, like now I'm thinking of all the things that are like super, super important right
Yeah.
now. Food. You talk about food. That was another thing I was cheering out loud of like, why don't we talk about this more? Um, let's say, for instance, I am a busy C-suite executive at a tech company, and I'm like, you know what? I buy people meals, whatever, whatever.
Mm,
Like we give gift cards, or for a sales challenge, we have whatever.
yeah.
Might you tell them that there's a more
Yes, I
thoughtful,
think the studies have
economical
shown
way
that
of
all the
doing something?
perks don't actually make people happier or more willing to stay or work 20 hours a day. Like, people don't actually care about all of the perks. They What they care about more is meaningful connection. And so when I think that the way that
Mm,
that's being done, it's quid pro quo, right? I'm throwing you food and swag and you're going to work harder and later and for less
yeah,
pay. And that's not the point. The
yeah,
point is, I work for this amazing company out of Charleston, and they don't do all of those glamorous items. They're a big company with a lot of people, and instead the CEO flies around to each of their locations over the course of a year and takes people out to dinner and recognizes them on an individual level and hears their
yeah,
stories and makes a connection with them. And that
yeah,
has been so
yeah,
powerful that you think, like, how long do people last in the tech world, right? Like 6 months to a year at this point
yeah,
before they're pivoting laterally to try to take a step up. His
yeah.
company, people have an average tenure of, I think it's like 10 or 15 years. It's amazing. People start if people start as
That's like 5
interns or
careers.
straight out of undergrad, and it's the culture that
Yeah.
they've built of that connection. That's what keeps them. They don't get lunch every day. They don't, it's not about that.
Yeah. So it's so insightful, I would think, for anyone thinking about management or hiring, all these things. I guess my final tiny question to you is, given that we know that money itself, even having extra time, doesn't necessarily lend itself to happiness,
Mm.
um, what are the main interests, and how might we as a field be able to associate negotiation with more than just money?
First, we do have to recognize that money and resources do buy happiness up to a certain point. So you have to get to a point of stability where you don't
Yeah.
feel stressed by money, that it's not a constant
Yeah.
source of scrambling to meet your basic or moderate needs. But then after that, I think that what
Yeah.
people are craving, especially in this tech AI driven world that is remote, is connection and the relationship
Mm.
and more meaningful connection. And that's where, we start with relationship and we start with our emotions and our interests and their interests because it is more, we find when you make those connections with people, people can almost always help you. It depends on whether they want to or not. And I
Mm.
don't think we focus enough on,
Mm. Yeah.
do people want to help us? Yeah.
Yeah, being the other person,
No, it's not easy. And it's just,
it's not easy.
we were together. I haven't seen you in however many years. We were together for a couple of hours. But what made that time much more connected and much more valuable and meaningful, at least to me, was when we had a more meaningful connection. And I think a lot of people would say that when they think back through over the last week or month or year, what were the moments that felt the best to them? It would be the opportunity to have a more
Yeah.
meaningful conversation, a deeper conversation when they did feel valued or they did feel like they were remembered in some way. And I think we
Yeah.
all just want to be seen as humans. And for someone to recognize us and the pains or the joys or all of that that's going on within us. And we forget about that because we are so busy and important and
Yeah.
whatever.
And all those things,
Yeah.
which, and this is maybe for our third podcast, something about, like, I read an article that was like, some people would rather be interesting than like
Yeah.
love themselves, and I was like, that felt really personal. Like, that, like, to some extent we're trying to pursue the things like love in our,
Totally. Like, look at me with
status
my
and
house and my
achievements,
car
etc.,
and my
even
bags
if
and
we know.
my, or my like credentials.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there's so much more to talk about, but I'm congratulations on
Thank
finishing a book which is does not seem like an easy labor at all, especially with co-author John Richardson. But really, congratulations to you both on doing what the field says to do, which is like keep knitting and keep it expanding. So excited for where you go next. And
Thank you.
where can
Thank you.
people
I
find out
appreciate
about you and
that.
your
I have
work
a
if they find out more
website,
about that?
attiaqureshi.com. There's a lot there. There are a lot of resources and tools. We talked about emotions a lot. I have an interactive emotion wheel that I created to help people get started on that. So it's slash
Nice.
emotions. And
Oh yeah,
yeah, there are all the things available right there.
cool. Thank you
Thanks for
so much
having
for
me.
your writing and work, and thank you again for being here.